Today, President Trump is in friendly territory in Poland right now. You're looking at pictures of crowds in Warsaw waiting to hear him speak next hour. You will hear that live right here. But the challenges that lie ahead at the G20 summit are many. That is where he will sit down face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin for an incredibly high-stakes meeting. Back with us, our panel, Robin Wright, Karun Demirjian, John Avlon, and David Sanger. John, just looking at how those around the president look at how he will approach or could approach this meeting, McMaster saying sort of anything's on the table, we'll see, versus how the president is going to approach it. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, with some interesting comments saying, I would say at this point it's difficult to say exactly what Russia's intentions are in this relationship. It seems diametrically opposed to how the president enters this meeting. How do you see it?
This is the fundamental contradiction of the administration. You've got a national security team which is highly regarded professionally, particularly H.R. McManus and James Mattis, playing a game of really contain the president, trying to create continuity in American strategy, a more forceful tone on the world stage. And the problem consistently has been is the president keeps undercutting his administration's own positions with tweet storms, with questions at press conferences which go off the rails. And yet there are these folks who are trying to create continuity and stability in a strong line. And unfortunately, the reality is they're trying to contain the president. The president trumps them at the end of the day, no pun intended, because he's got the bully pulpit. He's got the podium. He's got the Twitter account.
Well, Robin, it wouldn't be the biggest gamble in the world to suggest that those who believe that this is going to be the meeting that H.R. McMaster or James Mattis predict, that they're setting themselves up for disappointment. We just heard the president question U.S. intel and leave logic aside how, on the Iraq war, he questions U.S. intelligence. Remember, it's very important to him that that war had been the wrong decision, that he be perceived as having been against it, although there's not great proof of that he doesn't believe them about Russian interference because he thinks that's bad for his legitimacy as president. But he does believe them about North Korea, even though that's not our best intel bank when it comes to understanding that nation. But he does believe the North Korean intel. So he just ran down the Russian intel. He wouldn't mention Putin by name. I mean, doesn't that tell you everything you need to know in terms of his posture entering the meeting with the Russian president?
Well, this is the most important meeting the president has probably had since taking office, and he's dealing with probably the shrewdest and most manipulative leader on the world stage, someone who has lived through 4 presidencies, who is very involved and down to the detail of whether it's arms agreements with the United States, the military deployments of the United States. He really knows these issues, and I think he has been also engaged in kind of psychological warfare with some of the other leaders he's met, bringing in his Labrador dog with Angela Merkel, who he knew was afraid of dogs. This is someone who is going to game this meeting. He's a very tough manipulator, and the danger is that Trump, who is still learning foreign policy, will find that, as some in the policy community fear, that Putin will eat him for lunch. And what are the deliverables? The challenge in this meeting is on what could they possibly agree. There are deep, profound, long-standing differences between the United States and Russia on the Ukraine. Syria, there may be some kind of movement on de-escalation zones, but it gets very complicated once you get into the specifics. And on North Korea, China and Russia have both taken a tough stand at the United Nations, saying that they don't want to go along with a U.S. proposal for tough new sanctions. So this is a meeting where it's going to be hard to see what President Trump can come out of this and show that he really is tougher or as tough as Vladimir Putin.
David Sanger, if the president decides not to bring up Russia's meddling in the U.S. election, what would the calculation be that would benefit him domestically here at home or in the eyes of Vladimir Putin? Because he would be opening himself up to vast criticism on the domestic front for not bringing that up, especially after his criticism of President Obama again today for not doing more on Russia. And in the eyes of Vladimir Putin, we know that Putin values strength. So wouldn't he see that as a weakness?
He certainly would, and there's a fairly easy way out of this, which is you can make a brief reference to the history, but then say, Mr. Putin, forget about what happened last year. Let's talk about what you're doing now and what you will be or will not be doing in the future. Because it's not like Russia's cyber activity has stopped. You saw them attempt to meddle in the French election. There's an election here in Germany in September where we've already seen Russian activity. You're seeing more Russian activity around the world. And so I think the big question here for President Trump is whether or not he can begin to convey to President Putin that if he stays on the path he's on, he's headed toward the old classic strategy of American containment of Russia. And so he's got 3 or 4 big objectives here, which Robin alluded to. There's common ground in Syria, perhaps. He's got to somehow come down pretty hard on the Russian continued activity in Ukraine. When I interviewed President Trump as a candidate, he didn't seem particularly concerned about what they were doing in Ukraine. We'll have to see if his view has changed. He's got to figure out how to stop Mr. Putin's efforts to try to meddle in the current European elections with American allies. And then finally, on the nuclear front, he has to figure out how to deal with a big Russian violation of a nuclear accord on intermediate missiles that has been going on for some time. And if he can't get out and explain how he discussed those topics and what ground he laid for that, I think it's going to be a problematic meeting.
Well, one of the concerns is that you give up a lot of leverage when you say that your own intel community gets things wrong. You know, when you go in to meet with the Russian president, you've given him a good entree to question your own suggestions and allegations in that meeting. But it won't be just Russia-specific. Here, John Avalon. You have this interweaving, this dovetailing of issues on Syria and in North Korea that will involve Russia, but also very important, intense meetings with the president of China, Xi, at the G20, also with Germany's leader, Angela Merkel. So let's put up the Xi. We have a little card for you of the issues that can come up in that one as well, because this will matter. You know, North Korea, you just had Xi and the Russian president, just to remind people, they put out a statement basically making North Korea and the United States sound like equal aggressors in the situation. North Korea has to stand down, and the United States and South Korea have to stand down. That's how they discussed it. Not good for the U.S.
Right, and look, and the administration has been taking a much tougher line on China in the wake of them not using adequate leverage to contain North Korea. But President Trump is surrounded by bad options in all the hot spots of the world. He's going to have to be a statesman. And this is one of the real problems, you know, when it's tough to be leader of the free world and king of the trolls at the same time. He's going to have to up his game and realize that the reality of what